going through what makes a good workout, talking about resistance training, we're talking about cardio, and then we're going to run through some questions that people typically have or have sent in. So the first piece of advice we want to offer, we know that some gyms are starting to open back up. If you're going back to those facilities, awesome. If you're still working out at home, whether you're new to fitness and trying to get started with this, whether you're somebody returning to fitness after kind of a small break with this, the big thing we want to say is wait in, don't jump in. All right. A lot of people tend to think that fitness is about going from 0 to 100 really quickly and trying to get there. And we want to encourage everyone to take it at your own pace, to find kind of your groove in fitness. If you've been away, we really need to ease into this. A lot of people tend to jump in, and that does not support success in the long run. You know, anytime you go from 0 to 100, you're likely to burn out. And that's not what we want. Fitness should be a lifestyle. It should be something that you do because it benefits you. And we shouldn't make this the ultimate challenge of how quickly can I reach this goal. We want you to enjoy the process as well. All right. So looking at activity guidelines, I brought up today just the American Heart Association, what they recommend, just so you have an idea of what is necessary to live kind of the healthiest life that we can. So what they offer is at least 30 minutes of moderate intensity workout, 5 days a week, with a total of 150 minutes for the week. And what you can see there is they have that picture there of somebody walking a dog. So this would be moderate intensity, is going to be things like that, walking, hiking, maybe a light bike ride, things like that. Or you can do 25 minutes a day, 3 days a week of vigorous activity, 75 minutes a week. So that's going to be things like running, more challenging biking, anything that's going to really get your heart rate elevated. The new thing that they added in just a few years ago is combining our aerobic activities with some kind of high intensity muscle strengthening. So what they want to see is 2 days a week that's focused on a moderate to high intensity of muscle strengthening activities. So whether that's resistance training, body weight training, plyometrics, things like that, we need to make sure that we're not just taking care of our heart, but also generally our muscles as well. So those are the guidelines from American Heart Association, things to consider when you're creating your own plan. All right. Program design, we have a couple things we want to consider. The number one rule with writing your workout or getting prepared for your workout program is there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all program. That's very popular in today. As a lot of you, I'm sure, know, social media has taken on its own life form in the fitness industry, where everybody is online, posting their pictures, posting their workouts, selling their programs to you. And I can assure you that if a program is set up where they just are sending out everybody that asks the same program, it might work, but it's not going to be the best way to go. So things we want to make sure you're considering is your age, your gender, your goals, and your experience level when we're setting your program together. So first, we're going to jump into resistance training. Here's just some general rules for when you're creating a workout, things to follow. So the first thing we want to do is no matter what type of program we're doing, we always want to work the muscles from biggest to smallest. All right. So I put that order there. You can see legs, back, chest, shoulders, arms. Generally, as we look at the different body parts, those are going to be our biggest to small muscle groups. I did not put abs in there. Primarily, you're going to want to hit abs at the end of a workout because your core is such a strong part of most lifting that if we weaken that before we do things like squats, deadlifts, if we're doing any kind of like isolation or control movement, that's going to be the weak link that fails, and you won't be able to properly challenge the muscle you're trying to work. So we kind of save core work for a separate time or towards the end of the workout. We want to move from compound movements to isolation movements. So compound just simply means anything that's going to be moving at multiple joints. So those are going to be the things you think of, like a bench press, push-up, squats, deadlifts, lunges, anything where you're moving at multiple joints. And then an isolation movement will be something like a bicep curl, right? All the movement is taking place at your elbow joint, and that's the only motion that's working. So we want to go from those big to small movements as well. And then as you're going through your workout, how do you want to progress? There's a couple different options. Progressive repetitions. So what that is where you take the same weight and say you do it for 8 reps the first time. The next week you try to do 9, and the next week you try to do 10, and you build up and you continue to improve the repetitions while the weight stays the same. You also have progressive resistance. That's going to be where the rep range is going to stay the same. You might be 8 reps. One week you do 30 pounds for 8 reps. The next time you try to do 35. And then there's also the option of doing both. This is the one that I recommend the most. So you'll see on that kind of graphic right there, depending on what you're working on, strength, endurance, hypertrophy, which is muscle growth, maximum strength or power, there's going to be recommended rep ranges. So an example here would be hypertrophy, 6 to 12 reps. So a way we can do both is we can do, let's say we're lifting 40 pounds and that first week we hit it for about 8 reps. What we'd want to do is keep working with 30 pounds until we can do it for 12 reps. And then from there, that's when we do the progressive resistance, go to 35 pounds, and that might bring us back down to 8 reps, but then we can keep building until we reach 12 and kind of working both of those together. And that's a great way to progress through your resistance training. And then we want to talk a little bit about cardio training. So cardio training, we're going to kind of break it into 4 phases of progression. Not everybody's going to start in phase 1. Some people might be above that, but we're going to go through all 4 so that way everybody in this group kind of finds the phase that they're in and kind of can take advantage of that. But a couple of things I want to just break down before we go into this. So a lot of people have heard of like max heart rate probably as 220 minus your age. That is an old system. It still works. It's not the end of the world if that's the one you choose to use, but it tends to over and under evaluate your max heart rate depending on the age group you're in. This is the new one that they've come up with that they believe is a little bit more specific, gets a little bit closer for each age. Usually they say that like the deviation is like 7 beats per minute. So what it's going to be is 208 minus 0.7 times your age. All right, so it's a little bit more math. It's a little bit harder. You might have to bust out the phone calculator for that one, but usually we have that available. So if you're going to use max heart rate for any of your cardio needs, that's the heart rate we prefer you to use. It's just a little bit closer. Another thing that I'll mention in here will be for the people that are not numbered people. So what we have is a ratings of perceived exertion, an RPE. So that's going to be just a scale 0 to 10. All right, so 0 is doing absolutely nothing. You're just sitting on your couch. And 10 is everything you've got. So sometimes when we're looking at these phases, it'll say kind of a number. And it goes more off of how you're feeling. You know, am I a 3? Am I a 5? Am I an 8? How hard am I working? So that works better for you. You'll have those options. And then the other thing we'll talk about is VT1 and VT2. So this is another way that you can gauge it. I just want to provide a lot of different options because I know there's different people that will connect different ways. But VT1 is going to be the point where you can still talk comfortably during exercise. So an example of this is if you go for a light walk with a friend, you're still able to talk with them as you're moving. That means you're going to be at VT1 or lower for that exercise. Once you get to that point where you're like, I can talk, but just barely, that's where you're hitting VT1. At any time where you can't sustain conversation, that's going to be past VT1, going all the way up to VT2, which is going to be really the point where like, that's as fast as I can go and I can't sustain it for long. So that's going to be like that full out sprint where maybe you can go 40 yards, keeping that speed. But after that, your body's going to say, let's slow down and let's back it down. So we might be using those just to kind of find ranges. So we're going to start with phase 1 here. So this can be your very beginner phase. So the focus here is to help sedentary clients become regular exercisers by creating positive exercise experiences. So if you've not been doing any kind of cardio training at any point, really within the last 6 months, this is probably where you're going to start off. How we know you're in this phase and when you can move to phase 2 is when a client can sustain steady state cardio for 20 to 30 minutes in zone 1. So that zone 1 is going to be, you'll see on that graph, is below VT1, meaning you should be able to talk comfortably. If you want to use an RPE, you're going to be saying about a 3 or a 4. All right. So after that, if you feel good in phase 1, we can then take it up to training phase 2. This is to increase duration and introduce intervals to improve aerobic efficiency and fitness. So we're going to increase the workload at VT1 and then do some low work in zone 2, as you can see from that graph, where we can do some intervals of where we kind of jump above and then come back down. So when they're saying intervals, that means we're just going from a high to low. So you want to go just above that VT1 RPE. So an example of this would be if you walk for 5 minutes and then do a 1-minute jog. You know, and then that jog gets you up above that VT1 where you can't really speak anymore. And then after that minute, you come back down to a walk. So that's going to be adding a little bit of interval training, pushing it above that VT1. And then as a client progresses, you can introduce the intervals and try to get closer to that zone 2 or reaching about an RPE of 6, taken from that 5 to 6. And then once you feel comfortable doing that, we can move to phase 3. So the important thing here is a lot of people will stay in phase 2. Phase 3 tends to be geared more towards people that are working on a specific goal within their cardio. So if you're trying to run a half marathon or a 5K, or if you're trying to improve performance, then that's when you're going to move into phase 3. But a lot of people will stay, if you're just a casual exerciser, you can stay in phase 2 and just have those intervals and still get a lot of the health benefits that come with fitness. So this is going to help clients with endurance performance goals, people that are performing 7 or more hours of cardio each week. So majority of the training is still going to be in that zone 1. So about 70 to 80% is going to be that below that VT1. So we're doing a kind of a light jog, a light walk, but then you're going to do more intervals and higher intensity sessions. So a little bit less than 10% will be in phase 2, and then about 10 to 20% will be in that phase 3, and that's where we're going to be pushing the max cardio and trying to really take it above and beyond. And then phase 4, this is going to be trying to improve phosphagen energy pathways, but for large accumulations of blood lactate. So this is going to be for like extreme performance. So it's going to be very similar, still 70 to 80% in that zone 1, less than 10% in the zone 2, and then 10 to 20% in zone 3. The main difference here is we're going to go to very intense anaerobic power intervals. So phase 4 would technically be things like that zone 3 training will be things like running up hills, pushing sleds, pushing cars, running with a parachute, things like that, where we're going to just take it to that next level. And then I did want to talk just a little bit about steady state versus HIIT, because those are two common terms that kind of get thrown around in cardio. We get a lot of questions about, should I, if I'm trying to lose weight or, change my thing or transform my body, am I going steady state? Should I be going HIIT? They have pros and cons of both, so I'm going to talk a little bit through those. So steady state, the big thing here is going to be less stress on the body. All right, so you might feel some pain in your joints might get a little more wear and tear, but things on like your muscle and actual like muscle activation, it's going to be less of a requirement. The intensity is going to be easier to control because you get to set a pace a little bit more versus all out and then trying to kind of recuperate after that interval. And because it's a little less stress on the muscles, there's less recovery time necessary in between sessions. So you can do it a little bit more frequently, but it's obviously at steady state, it's going to be a little bit longer of an exercise. And my recommendation is that if you're new to cardio, if you're kind of beginning your fitness journey, steady state is probably the better place to start. So versus high intensity interval training or HIIT training, this is obviously going to be similar to like the zone 3 stuff we were just talking about, where we're going to increase the intensity for some time and then have a time where we're going to have a lower like recovery phase and going back and forth. So big benefit here is it's going to be more time efficient. You're going to meet those higher levels. So you're not going to be able to go and do a HIIT workout that's going to last an hour long, like you might for like an hour long jog. So it's going to be more time efficient. There's greater muscle activation. So if you're working on building muscle, but also want to have some cardio in there, this might be a better way to introduce that because it's going to play along with what you're doing in the gym. Obviously, you just want to make sure that you're not overdoing it and you're scheduling well, that you're still getting the proper recovery. With that recovery, you're going to need a longer recovery because it is going to be more demanding on the systems of your body, on muscle repair, things like that. So it's a better option for people that are a little more experienced, have a little better understanding of how their body recovers, what they need to recover, and can add that in. And so I wanted to just go into a couple of options that you might have for breaking down your workout. So you see these a lot. These are very common ways to split up resistance training. And I'm going to have a schedule on the next slide, but we'll break it down a little bit here. So full body is going to be obviously going in and hitting every single muscle group in a workout or most muscle groups in a workout and focusing primarily on just a full holistic approach. The nice thing about this is that you can hit the muscles more frequently because you're training full body every time you go in, but it will be less intensity for each muscle group per the workout because you are going to be hitting it more frequently. You need to make sure you're not going too hard so there's time that you're able to recover before your next workout. Another popular one is this PPL or push-pull legs. So this switches things for pushing motion. So pushing will be things like your chest, triceps, shoulders. Pull will be things like your back and your biceps. And then obviously legs will be the lower part of your body. This allows you to get a little bit more muscle concentration during the workouts. So instead of doing maybe 1 or 2 exercises, you can hit 3 or 4 for each muscle group, but it does require more recovery time for those muscles. So that's why you do push, pull, legs, upper and lower. Again, it just splits that full body in half. So one day you're doing upper body, one day you're doing lower. It's more muscle concentrated than full body and allows more training frequency. You can get into the gym more often. If you're looking for like a 4-day split, that's a great way. Another 4-day split would be splitting things, and I'll show on the next slide how I would split them up. But it takes body parts and lets you do 4 days a week, has a higher muscle concentration than PPL, and allows more training frequency. And then the last one we'll look at is like a 5-day split for people that are looking to be in the gym a little more frequently. Will have the highest body concentration or muscle concentration, requires the most recovery time. So if you're on a phone, this is going to be hard to see, but I do have kind of a graph up here that will show ways you can split it up. So if you're looking at full body, you'll see Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we do full body resistance training, and then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, we have the options for resting or maybe throw it in some HIIT or steady state cardio on those days. If you're looking to work out more than 3 times a week. PPL, you can see it's the same thing, a 3-day split, but we're just doing push, pull, and legs. Upper, lower, we go upper on Monday, lower on Tuesday, take a day off. Then we can do upper and lower again Thursday and Friday. So that way we get a 4-day resistance plan. For a 4-day split, this is going to be more for people looking to do like hypertrophy type workouts, where you can do a chest and shoulder day, a back day, take a day off, and then do legs and arms. And then body part splits will be specifically for people that are more into hypertrophy, trying to build muscle. They can do a chest, back, legs, shoulder, and arms day. So those are just simple ways to break down your week. Obviously, if you want to focus more on cardio, you could do the same thing, just doing the 4 days a week cardio, 3 days a week cardio, and throw those in there as well. So moving right along here, I do want to address some questions that we did get submitted before we turn it over. If there's anybody that in this chat that has specific questions, I can try to answer. So one question I got was, what is the best warm-up to do before exercise? Again, this is one where there's not really one answer. There's no one like, everybody, no matter what you're doing, this is what you should do to warm up. The important thing is that it should be specific to your workout. So obviously, if I'm doing a lower body workout, I don't need to be doing a bunch of like arm circles and things like that. That's not a good use of my time because that's not preparing for the movements. I think I got something in the chat. Let's see if I don't know if I can see the chat while I'm here, but share my screen. So it should be about 5 to 10 minutes in length. We want a low to moderate intensity, and then it should be taking the working joints through full range of motion. So we want to make sure we're really activating whatever muscle or joints we're trying to use. And then if you're going to do any like mobility work during your warm up, it should be a dynamic stretch and not a static. So what I mean by that is dynamic means moving. So that's going to be like if you're like rocking into a stretch or like stretching the muscle, but kind of holding the stretch and then releasing, versus static is going to be what you traditionally think of as a stretch, where you like hold a certain stretch for 30, 45 seconds, things like that. So those are the things you want to consider when you're doing a warm up. Another question I got was, how long should you run to start burning fat? This is a very complicated question when you look at the science. So when you're looking at burning fat as a fuel, it's really not about the length of time. It's going to be about the intensity. So you'll see a little chart here on the side. You'll see that blue line is going to indicate fat as the primary fuel. And you'll see that green line, that CHO stands for carbohydrates. So that's going to be your carbs. And what it shows is as intensity increases, the body is most likely going to switch from using fat as a fuel to carbohydrates. So there's that switch point at about 65% of your VO2 max, which is where it's a 50-50 split. And then beyond that intensity, you're going to see carbs as the primary source. So to answer this question, what this graph seems to imply is that if you want to burn fat as fuel, you want to do a lower intensity workout. Now the trade-off here is going to be if you're doing a lower intensity workout, you might burn more fat than carbs, but for the same time, you're going to burn less calories. And at the end of the day, calorie expenditure is going to be the biggest factor to weight loss. So if you're doing a low intensity exercise, you would have to do it a longer period of time to burn the same amount of calories. So it really depends on how you want to train. If you have that time that you want to dedicate to long walks, that's a great way to target fat as a fuel source. But again, it'd be you'd have to walk a lot longer than if you did a moderate intensity jog, which might burn less fat, but it's going to burn more calories for the same amount of time. So it's kind of a balanced question there. There's no real answer about fat burning when it comes to running, things like that. Another question we've got, which we're happy to answer, and I think Paul might chime in here and answer this question, is will LSU UREC continue to offer virtual classes throughout the summer?
We certainly will. I think, yeah, thanks, Ethan. We certainly will. We've gotten a lot of feedback about the popularity of the classes, both from seeing the number of participants in the classes, but also the feedback that we received via email and different messages we got. I think as people are trying to be safe during this time, I think it's a really great option for us to make sure that if people feel a little bit more comfortable staying at home and getting their workouts in from home, that's going to be the best option for them. But for those who do want to come in and use the UREC when we do reopen, we will have plans in place to make sure that we can follow social distancing guidelines while still offering group fitness classes. Whether that be we take the group fitness classes down to our basketball courts and open up the space a little bit larger so that we have more room for everyone and still offer a large class where everyone still can feel safe in that space and maintain those guidelines. So this is definitely something that we think about and we've been planning for. We want to make sure that we have all the offerings that we can for any person who comes in to use the facility or decides to stay at home for those workouts. And just as a reminder, if you go ahead and check out our UREC website, so lsuuniversityrec.com, we do have all of our classes up there currently that you can sign up for week to week. But also under that, we have our Group X class descriptions that have video links of past classes that we have filmed. So you follow along like you would any normal class. So if you were just to start those up as if they were a YouTube link and you just run through the class with the instructor, that's always an opportunity for you as well to get a really good workout in when you're at home.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul, for clearing that up for everybody. We're happy to be able to still provide virtual classes for the summer, but also ready to get back in the building and do those when we can. And then the last question that I got that I'm going to go ahead and answer here is, will there be any new equipment when the students return to campus? So that's something that I, along with Paul, oversee very closely. And I can tell you there is nothing we love more than being able to continue to grow and improve our facility. We think we have a world-class facility and we always want to make it better. But just like everybody else, once COVID kind of hit, all of our attention had to switch to, one, making sure that we can do our jobs while protecting our users and our staff as best as possible, and finding solutions to new problems that we've never had to encounter. So right now, probably when students come back to campus, we will be just focusing on adjusting to the new normal. But please know that the second we kind of have our handle on that, we still continue to look to provide the best facility that we can, and we'll continue to grow and bring in new equipment and educate people as that equipment becomes available.
Exactly, and I think at that same time, we're going to be looking at ways to space out equipment safely. So when we're moving those things around, that might look like there's not as much equipment out on the floor as there was in the past, only for the spacing guidelines, so that as many people can use the space as we're allowed to provide, depending on state legal regulations that we have to follow. So that's all going to be very important to us. So no, there might not be any new equipment, and there might even be fewer pieces of equipment that you're used to seeing, but that's entirely going to be based off of the safety of our users to make sure that they get the most out of their workouts in a safe space. So just keep that in mind when we do reopen the UREC and get back into that space. Ethan, I know you mentioned that was the last question that popped up from the ones that have been previously submitted. One thing I did want to add in, and you mentioned this early on, you jumped in and you said, rather don't jump into the water, wade your way in. And I totally agree with that. I think that this is a time that we really got to take a self-evaluation of what we've been doing over the last 2.5 months. Now that a lot of people have been at home, either with the stay-at-home order or just at home and generally from leaving campus and going away, is have you been exercising frequently and regularly? If you've noticed that you spend a lot more time sitting down, either on a couch or you're just sitting down because of the work that you're doing, and you're not as active as you typically were, maybe this is something that you can measure through a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or one of those where you can kind of see how many steps you take in a day. As you see those activity levels, take a self-evaluation to note, am I at that same fitness level? Many of us will not be, and that's okay. That's why we're saying wade into those waters. In the same way, there's also going to be specific muscle groups that you might want to focus on when you return. A lot of the glute and hip area, we're going to find a lot of weakness there because of the amount of sitting that we've been doing, especially if you're not able to have any weights at home, or if you do have weights, you might have lighter weights. You might not have had the opportunity to squat, deadlift, a lot of those major compound lifts that Ethan was talking about early on. Those are great ways to strengthen those areas of the muscle. So when you're doing that, that's going to be something that we want to focus in on when we return. And then also when you come back, you're not going 100%. There's going to be a new normal for all of us in many ways, but a new normal in the gym as well is making sure that you ramp your way up into a safe place so that you're not just going straight into sprints right when you walk into the facility. I know we're all excited to get back. I know Ethan and I talk a lot about our workouts now and how excited we are when we have the opportunity to get back in and get our workouts going again. But we also realize that we're not going for 100% maximum effort the first day back. That's a great way to get injured and a great way to hurt your progress overall for the long term. So as we know, fitness is a lifelong game. And so we're going to make sure that we slowly ease our way back into it so that over the next few months, we can get back to where we were and hopefully grow beyond that.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. I did just look in the chat and I'm reading through and I want to make sure I get to some of the questions that were put in there. I see one in particular from Ray. We're talking about quad pain. So can't squat or deadlift or really bend knee to 90 degrees without pain. Exercises or exercise split could I work in that would maintain quad strength and balance between legs? All right, so that is a very, very specific question. Obviously, the first thing that I would say is hopefully this is something you've seen a doctor or healthcare provider about, and hopefully they've given you a kind of a list of things where like contraindications, things that you should not be doing. And I'm assuming like squatting and deadlifting is going to be part of that. But it would be important just to have that from a doctor before answering that question fully. But my main advice for that would be just knowing what you can. I would focus on a lot of single leg balance exercises if you can. So there's a lot of ways you can do options, even as simple as standing on your right leg, picking the left leg up. If that feels really good, you can do things like at an unstable surface, whether that's standing on a pillow at home, something that's just a little less stable, whether it's closing your eyes. Of course, if you're going to do that, stand next to a wall or something where you'll be able to catch yourself just in case as you build that balance. But you'll be able to feel that. Once you feel good on a straight leg with that, working on that balance and quad strength, then you can add these like slight bends in where you're doing just like a soft knee bend. And then that will allow you to get a little more quad and activation there. I'd also make sure if you can, any stretching, foam rolling, things like that you can do around it that doesn't cause any discomfort, trying to just get as much blood flow, things like that. That's where I'd probably say my starting point is. To be honest, to go any deeper into detail for that, I would need to know a little bit more information because I'd want to make sure I'm not giving you advice that goes against advice you've already received. So one thing I am going to do, and I just put it in there, and hopefully everyone will see it as I work, I did just add my email address in there. So I'm a full-time employee at the UREC. I'm always working, 8 to 5, ready to answer any questions. So if you do have specific questions like that you want to run past me, that's a great way for us to take advantage of that. So that way I get a little more information to make sure I'm giving you the best advice. But that would be my starting point for things like that. And then obviously knowing that a squat does not necessarily mean 90 degrees depth. So if you can squat 3 inches without any pain and stand back up, I mean, that's a great exercise to use that's going to still activate your quads and things like that in a way. But without knowing kind of what your pain level is and what your range of motion is, that's about as specific as I can get right now. But I'd be happy to dive deeper into that. And I'd encourage anybody else, if you have questions and this is just not the forum where you feel like you can send your question out, please email me anytime and I will get back to you usually in the same day, and be happy to talk about any of that with y'all. So
hey, I think it's really important to highlight there, as you said at the beginning, the healthcare provider and what a doctor would say. They would give us the best guidelines to work off of, whether or not this is going to be an acute injury that happens one time, or if this is going to be something that's chronic and happens over time, and is going to be with you for a very long time. 2 years does sound like a long time. As somebody who has injured their knee multiple times in some pretty drastic fashions, it takes a long time to recover from that. But certainly ways that we would work through that would be to find those end ranges of motion where you're still comfortable in them. Like one movement that I really like is lunges. So I would seek to find either an opportunity where we're stable in the front. So either we're holding on to something in front of us. This is something that a lot of people like to do in the kitchen, where they take a towel under one foot, they have a stable foot, and they have an unstable foot, in the idea that the towel is underneath that foot, and they can slide that back leg back into a lunge position and develop that leg strength unilaterally. So one leg at a time, but still kind of work to a position of, all right, I found where my end range is before I feel that pain again. And still working to that point. So as Ethan mentioned earlier, sometimes that squat can only be 3 inches. That's okay if that's part of the game plan to bring that recovery back to where you want to be long-term. But that's a great question. That, like, obviously everyone's fitness is individualized. So we're all working together on that one to kind of get the best answer for you. And I think this is a little opportunity for a shameless plug. If you're somebody that has kind of taken a step back in your exercise routine and kind of stepped away from a little bit, there's a great opportunity to kind of work with some of our personal trainers. Our personal trainers that we have in-house are all certified, nationally recognized, and they all work with clients to bring them back into their fitness routine. So if you've been out of it for a while and maybe this time at home has taken you even further out of your routine as it ever was, this might be something to look into when we're able to get back on campus and get all of our programming back up and running. So great. Again, as Ethan mentioned, if there's any other questions, feel free to add them into the chat. If not, feel free to reach out to Ethan there via email. Also, if you want to look into some of the PowerPoints, the slides that Ethan had today, go ahead and shoot me a private message in there, and I'll make sure that those get sent out to you as well, and get that going. One final thing before we go, Ethan, I really want to point out that first off, thank you for doing this with us, having this conversation. I think getting these exercises up and going in our own head as to what we want to be getting into when we return into the gym is really valuable. But also to that, I think we've been having a few of these sessions so far, these webinars. Next week, we've got another one. Kristen Cummins from the Student Health Center is going to be talking about kind of what the mental health and mental well-being should be looking like during this time. You know, a lot of us have been isolated. We've been away from our typical routines. So ways to kind of protect yourself and think through a lot of that activity outside of the physical well-being, but more into that mental well-being. So that's going to be next week, May 27th at 4 p.m. We're going to have that coming up as well. So that's going to be another exciting one to log in and check out as well. Ethan, anything you want to add before we go?
No, just thank you all for coming and listening to me talk for a little while, and I hope you got something out of it. And if you're looking to get a little bit more, like I said, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'll be happy to talk about whatever your fitness needs are.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for reaching out. We'll kind of have the chat going for a little bit longer. So if you have any direct questions for us, feel free to send them on in.